Good morning. Welcome to Breakfast with John Kay and Naga Munchetti.
Our headlines this morning: the Tories are set for a stunning by-election victory in Hartlepool. The seat has been a Labour stronghold for more than 50 years. We're going to have the result in the next few minutes.
A long night of counting and a long history for Labour in this town. It'll come to an end, though, in the next few minutes.
It's just one in a bumper set of local, regional and national elections involving tens of millions of voters across the country. We'll analyse what it all means throughout the programme.
Good morning. Green means go, but where to? Travel companies and holidaymakers await the government's green list of destinations. It's expected later, so I'll look at what tests and forms you'll need for a break in the sun this year.
Good morning. A full English is off the menu in the Europa League. Although Manchester United, as expected, are into the final, it's agony for Arsenal as they're knocked out by Villarreal and their former manager.
Good morning. It's a frosty start for some of us this morning, a cold start for most, and we're looking at a day of sunshine and showers, some heavy and thundery with some hail. Then into the weekend, it's looking wet and windy. I'll have all the details coming up.
Good morning, everybody. Friday, the 7th of May, and a big political story this morning ahead of a very big political weekend, because any minute now, the result of the Hartlepool by-election is going to be announced, with the Conservatives now confident of a stunning victory. This is the scene inside the Millhouse Leisure Centre in Hartlepool, where those final votes are being counted, and a declaration any second.
We're waiting for that, and of course we will bring you that as soon as it happens. We understand that the Labour Party has all but conceded defeat, admitting that it failed to get over the line. Hartlepool has been a Labour stronghold since it was created in 1974. That result is pending. We'll bring it to you, but first, this report from our correspondent, Jonathan Blake.
Democracy delivered in Hartlepool. The votes are in, and with them, a verdict. For decades, Labour has counted on this seat as one of its safest. But now, after taking so much of the party's territory in the general election 2 years ago, the Conservatives are confident this too could be theirs. Careful counting and socially distanced democracy in action has made for a long night. But in the early hours, Labour all but conceded defeat.
We haven't got over the line tonight, which clearly is disappointing. I think we had a good candidate. We had a solid campaign, one that had integrity, one that had a clear plan for Hartlepool behind it. But ultimately on the day, I just don't think we were able to achieve the numbers.
A blow-up Boris Johnson appeared in Hartlepool to mark the Tories' expected victory, which proves the Prime Minister can command support here for his party beyond the delivery of Brexit. Something else for Conservatives to celebrate. The party took control of Nuneaton and Bedworth Council in Warwickshire, one of 143 being contested across England.
People respect what the Prime Minister has done during this pandemic. They think the vaccine rollout is phenomenal, and they think that given all the challenges that we've faced, that the Conservative government, the Prime Minister, has done a really good job in difficult circumstances, and many of those people on the doorsteps have been right behind him.
In almost every layer of local government, counties, boroughs, districts and more, almost 5,000 council seats are up for election. In the North East, the Conservatives gained seats on Sunderland City Council, eroding Labour's once rock-solid hold.
And I think what we've seen tonight is a lot of the UKIP votes have gone to the Conservatives. And we've retained some seats, but others have lost it as well. So, you know, that's politics for you, I think, at the end of the day.
Dudley in the West Midlands is one to watch. Either main party could take control. In the South East, there was a win for the Conservatives, taking Harlow Council in Essex from Labour. The counting continues in Cornwall, where, like many places, they'll be tallying the ballots for many hours yet. In London, Labour's Sadiq Khan is seeking a second term as mayor, one of 13 city and regional mayors up for election. The Conservatives hoping to hang on to the West Midlands, Labour eyeing up West Yorkshire. Those are some of the many, many more results to come from these elections held in the shadow of a pandemic. Slowly, across England, a renewed political picture is emerging. Jonathan Blake, BBC News.
So we can take you to that counting hall at the moment now where the election results are being received. This is in Hartlepool, of course. Labour, it has been a Labour seat since 1964. We are expecting that result any minute. And, of course, as soon as that comes in, we will bring that to you.
In the meantime, though, we can speak to our political correspondent, Chris Mason, who's live in Hartlepool for breakfast this morning. And, Chris, Labour have all but conceded defeat. The Conservatives are putting up giant inflatable Boris Johnsons. It seems like all we need is a declaration, but everyone's expecting a big Conservative win.
Yeah, morning to you, John. That is exactly what we're anticipating. I should insert a note of caution. On mornings like this, the word imminent is thrown around with abandon, and then we're told every 5 minutes that it's been pushed back by another 15 minutes. The latest indication is that we will get that declaration at around about 6:15. But yes, all we are waiting for is confirmation of the numbers. It is widely accepted that Hartlepool will have this morning a Conservative MP for the first time since 1964. Back then, you could buy a house in the UK on average for £3,000. Beatlemania was sweeping America. What a long time this town has had a Labour MP, and yet it's another block in that so-called red wall that has been bulldozed out by Boris Johnson and will leave some very, very awkward questions for Sir Keir Starmer, because he took over from Jeremy Corbyn, saying he was inheriting a party that had fallen to its lowest general election performance since 1935, and yet this result suggests they hadn't yet hit rock bottom back in 2019. Now, there'll be some within the party, within Labour, who will point out that the Brexit party performed particularly well here at the last general election. They've all but vanished in a rebranding exercise since then, and it didn't require that many Brexit party voters to shift over to the Conservatives to push the Conservatives over the top. Nonetheless, when you're explaining, you're losing sometimes in politics, and for Labour, in this seat at least, it's going to be a very tricky explaining job to do.
Obviously, we're all waking up to Hartlepool this morning, and it's difficult, isn't it, to read too much into a by-election result alone. But this is just the starter, isn't it? Ahead of a really busy political weekend, we could be in a very different place by Monday morning.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, this is a buffet of election results, John, that we're going to get all across the weekend. This is just the very first one. They'll be tumbling towards us at a rate of knots throughout today and tomorrow and Sunday. And yes, this is just one by-election result. It doesn't change the maths at Westminster, but it will contribute to changing the mood. Now, Labour will hope in other parts of Great Britain, as the results come in, that there might be better results for them. The mayoral race, perhaps in the west of England, the mayoral race in West Yorkshire. And if they can point to some gains chalked up alongside a defeat in Hartlepool, perhaps by Monday morning when the new MP for this town arrives in Westminster, things might seem for them not quite as negative as they're likely to in the next couple of hours. But crucially, it will still be hard in a Westminster sense, given that this is a Westminster context, for Sir Keir Starmer to point to any sense of progress. Because it's one thing saying a year or so into your leadership you're all about rebuilding, when the results, particularly as far as Westminster seats are concerned, suggest the opposite. It can create a mood where some within the party will wonder, is it ever realistically possible in one term for Sir Keir Starmer to climb what he describes as a mountain and try and overhaul a Conservative majority and become Prime Minister at the next election, which of course could be just a couple of years away. By contrast, the Conservatives will be absolutely jubilant. They've had these bumpy headlines, haven't they, for the last couple of weeks, with all of the allegations of what critics describe as sleaze and all of the questions around lobbying, for instance. They've consistently said that as much as that created a tension and noise at Westminster, it wasn't something lots of people outside Westminster were particularly fussed by. They will use this result as evidence that they were right in that judgment.
So, Chris, we're expecting, I'm reluctant to use the word imminently after what you just said, but we're expecting this result imminently inside the Millhouse Leisure Centre there in Hartlepool. But Labour, I've just seen, have already put out a statement this morning saying the message from voters is clear, even though we haven't heard it formally yet. We've heard it, says Labour. We understand things. We are listening. We will redouble our efforts. I mean, is Keir Starmer in personal trouble as leader if this loss comes for Labour as we expect?
It's a fair question to ask. I think probably not, but the question will be asked, and there are some sceptics within Labour, particularly those who were loyal to Jeremy Corbyn and particularly frustrated at what they felt was the rough ride that he encountered from people within the Labour Party and indeed more broadly, who have been itching to see evidence that Sir Keir Starmer perhaps wasn't quite as good as his supporters claimed him to be. That said, I think Labour recognise the magnitude of the mountain that they have to climb. They also, as I say, will have seen the numbers from Hartlepool, and so whilst that this is wounding for them, perhaps it's not all that surprising given the performance, as I say, of the Brexit Party last time round. And also at the moment there doesn't seem to be an obvious candidate who would necessarily want to sweep in and take on the job of leader of the opposition, which is often described as the hardest job in politics, and quite frankly right now, given the electoral mathematics at Westminster, is undeniably the hardest job in British politics. So you see there, and Labour sources have been saying it throughout the night here, that yes, it was tough, this was a tough campaign. Conservatives have been pretty buoyant about their likely performance here for the last couple of weeks, sufficiently buoyant, as you say, that they've now inflated this giant Boris Johnson outside the Count Centre just down the road. And instead, Labour starting this process of rebuilding with this rhetoric about redoubling their efforts. They know they've got to at least redouble them, retreble them if that was a word, because that's the scale of the electoral challenge that they face. This kind of seat are seats that normally would not even register on a general election night as being remotely interesting, because political strategists on all sides would chalk them up as a guaranteed Labour seat, in the same way that there are seats that are always associated with the Conservatives. And yet here today, joining all of those other seats in the north of England and the English Midlands, falling the way of the Conservatives for the first time in a generation.
Chris Mason, we will be back with you imminently, I promise, or as imminently as we believe. There we go, inside the hall. The votes counted in this unusual COVID time by tellers with masks on and blinds on. But yeah, we think the counting's done. It's just a matter of amassing the candidates and their agents and getting them up on the stage for the declaration.
Interesting as well, you know, Chris saying that not often you would be focusing somewhere like Hartlepool, but obviously this is all about the swing to the Conservatives. Also reports as well, we'll be keeping an eye on Nuneaton and Harlow as well. Early results indicating some big swings as well to the Conservatives from Labour. So we will keep you up to date. And as John said, big, next few days, big political weekend for us to keep on top of. Time now is 13 minutes past 6. So we have been hearing the result of the Hartlepool by-election is due shortly, so we've been told. We've all been there at those times where you're waiting and waiting and waiting for that result, and you're told it's 5 minutes and you're down the line and never quite happens.
Are you sure?
Yeah, never quite happens.
And I guess it's different this time because of COVID and they can't gather in the same way.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's talk to the BBC's North East political editor, Richard Moss, who is inside the Millhouse Leisure Centre, where the final votes are being counted. So, Richard, first question, exactly what minute past 6 are we going to get this result?
I think it could be some minute after 7 now. Yes, I'm told there's 3 more boxes they need to go through. There was an initial estimate a long time ago that we might be at 7 a.m. for a declaration. Then they brought it back to about 5:30, but now I think we're back at possibly around 7 for a final declaration here in Hartlepool. So
and Richard, I mean, you know how these things work as well. I mean, just explain to our viewers what's happening behind you, because on a normal election night, you'd see people milling around, wouldn't you, in groups. You'd kind of get a feeling, the frisson, kind of where the excitement is and moving. But with COVID restrictions, obviously that's so different this year.
There is. They've restricted the number of people who can be in here, and obviously what you get in a normal by-election is you get the agents for the candidate, but you also get a lot of supporters coming in ready to cheer or perhaps commiserate with their candidates, and that isn't allowed this time, so it's going to be rather different, although there seems to be more and more people gathering as time has gone on. But actually, of course, yeah, it is problematic. You can see that there's screens here. They're obviously having to be careful about handling pieces of paper, social distancing. So I think that has meant that this has taken perhaps longer even than the council anticipated to try and get a result.
And also, I mean, you've been, obviously, this is your patch. What are people saying in terms of the attention that's being paid now to Hartlepool as this, you know, key swing area?
Well, I mean, they've been deluged by politicians, and houses have been deluged by leaflets over the last few weeks. We've had 3 visits from the Prime Minister, 3 visits from Keir Starmer. That's how important this has been to Conservative and Labour. And yes, Hartlepool is enjoying its moment in the sun, I suppose, but they want to deliver a result now, obviously. And obviously, you know, we have had effectively a concession by the Labour Party about this result. We haven't got the final result yet, but they're saying that they haven't got the numbers to win. So, of course, what people here will want now is for whoever is the new MP, it looks like Conservative candidate Jill Mortimer, to deliver on promises that have been made during the campaign, to bring more jobs and investment here, to make this a wealthier and happier place.
Indeed, and of course, as we all know, these are local elections, regional elections. These are about what's happening on the ground, not necessarily the bigger story that we all seem to focus on in terms of larger politics, party politics. Richard, thank you so much. That's Richard Moss there, who's BBC North East's political editor.
We're keeping across that line to Hartlepool, and we'll bring you all the latest of that result and all the elections that are taking place, because Hartlepool is imminent, but we've got lots of results over the next few days. Full coverage right across the BBC. We've got it covered.
19 minutes past 6 is the time.
She can watch the political results on the BBC right through the weekend.
I advise her not to do that. I advise her to go out and get a walk, have a walk,
you know,
and relax with her
get some
family.
Fresh air. You know, this sort of time in the morning, we often show you a live picture, don't we, of the sunrise over some beautiful part of the UK. This morning, we have a live shot for you of the Mill House Leisure Centre in Hartlepool. Why? Because those people have the future of the town politically in their fingertips. They are counting through the last couple of boxes now. We think we're down to the last 2 or 3 ballot boxes, and there'll be a declaration there. It's the by-election in Hartlepool. It's been a Labour seat for decades, but Labour seem to have conceded defeat in the last hour or so, even before the official announcement. So we're going to be keeping you across events there throughout breakfast this morning.
We were told the result would be around 5:30. Now we're thinking closer to 7. But we'll bring it to you when it comes. First, though, find out what's happening wherever you are this morning with the news, travel and weather.
Good morning from BBC London. I'm Victoria Hollins. Early this morning, Harlow in Essex became one of the first councils to declare the results of yesterday's voting in the local council elections. Labour lost control to the Conservatives, who took 7 seats. Political correspondent Andrew Sinclair was there and sent this a little earlier.
Harlow has been a Labour council for the last 9 years, but this morning it's back in Conservative control after the party won 12 of the 13 seats being contested. The council leader, one of the casualties. Concerns about bin collections and the state of the high street were probably a factor. Internal Labour divisions didn't help, but the Conservatives say that the vaccination programme kept coming up on the doorsteps, and in a town which has been badly hit by COVID, that's probably the main reason for this Conservative success.
Well, polls closed at 10 p.m. last night. The count for the London mayoral election starts at 7 this morning. The results expected over the weekend. They're taking longer than usual to come in because of COVID restrictions. Right, I'm back with the latest from the BBC London newsroom in half an hour. There's, of course, plenty more on our website. Bye-bye.
Hello, you're watching Breakfast with John Kay and Naga Munchetti.
Good morning. Just after 6:30, in the next half hour or so, we will get the result of the Hartlepool by-election. The first of many political results we're going to get over the next few days. The Conservatives there seem to be confident of victory. It would be a stunning victory. Labour have already conceded defeat in everything but the detail yet. So we'll get those details of the count shortly. That's the scene inside the leisure centre as we await.
Time now is 6:33. 48 million people across Britain had the chance to have their say after a bumper day of elections yesterday.
And the first results are starting to trickle in, and they're going to continue trickling into a great deluge through the weekend. Lots to work through. Let's speak now to Newsnight's policy editor, Lewis Goodall, who's going to be keeping track of it all for us. Morning, Lewis. I guess, should we start with Hartlepool? Because that's going to be the big headline to start with, isn't it?
Absolutely, John. We've been waiting for it all night, of course, but we're not bitter about it. No, not at all. But we're expecting it in the next half hour or so. This was the result back in 2019. You'll see here Mike Hill, he's resigned now. He took the seat for Labour in 2019, got 38% of the vote. Conservatives very close second with 29%. And then look at this third column here. This is the Brexit Party vote, led by Nigel Farage at the time, a very creditable third place, one of the very, very best performances in the country. And the really big question as to this election, of course, has been what happens to this third column. And it seems like, from everything that we've learned from Hartlepool and the results that we know so far, people on the ground saying that much of this has indeed effectively been absorbed by the Conservative Party. And you can see it would easily be enough to take them over the line. And this is a really important and historic result. You can see here all of the different election results in the past, going all the way back to 2005. Each of them, each and every one of them, a Labour victory. If we extended that all the way back, we could take it all the way back to 1964, the 1964 general election when Harold Wilson was Prime Minister. That is how long this seat has been in Labour hands. So it really will be a very, very significant moment, not least because, of course, the big question of this by-election, in a way, has been to say, well, wait a minute, if the Tories can win Hartlepool with Brexit Party votes, then given that the Brexit Party stood in loads of other Labour seats as well and got a lot of votes as well, and basically saved the Labour Party in the 2019 election because it meant that those Brexit Party voters didn't vote Conservative, well, what about all the other seats as well that could also be lost to the Conservatives at the next general election? That, of course, could happen because there are about 38 other seats in the country, parliamentary seats, where the Brexit Party vote was actually greater than the Labour majority at that time. So it is going to send a real shiver down the spine of many Labour MPs. But of course, we haven't got that result yet. But what we can do is start to look at exactly what is going on in the rest of the country, assuming this magic wall actually does work, which it isn't at the moment. Oh, here we go. Just getting used to it this morning. You know, it's very, very early doors. Here we go. So let's have a look at, let's just have a quick look at, oh, it's not working at the moment.
Lewis, do you want the remote control, mate?
You know, look, I mean, it's very early. We're just getting used to each other, this screen and me, you know what I mean? It was absolutely fine about 5 minutes ago. It's decided to have a bit of a mood. But never mind. Oh, well, we can just look at Hartlepool again.
Don't worry. You've got till Monday morning, the whole weekend of this.
Well, exactly. We've got plenty of time. Oh, it seems to have completely. I mean, I knew this would happen just as we were about to go on air. Well, never mind. What I was going to show you, John, if it had been working, I mean, me and him are going to have words in a minute after this. What I was going to show you was the fact that we've had lots of other council election results come in throughout the night. Loads more to come. We've had 5,000 due to come in over the course of the next 48 hours or so. But the ones that we have had in do seem to support this the general thing that has happened in Hartlepool as well. They seem to support the idea that the Conservatives are absorbing the old UKIP vote, because it was UKIP then, before the Brexit Party, the many-headed creature that was various different parties under Nigel Farage. They're absorbing the UKIP vote, absorbing the Brexit vote, managing to overturn big Labour majorities in places like Nuneaton, in places like Bedworth, in places like Northumberland. These places which have historically had much greater Labour representation. And now, as a result of those two forces coming together, the Conservative vote and what was the UKIP vote, overturning many of those Labour majorities. So already the Conservatives look like they're going to be gaining, Labour going backwards. And remember, this is so unusual. We are in the middle term of the government. We're 11 years in to a Conservative government. Normally oppositions are barnstorming ahead, or they should be, if they hope to get into government by the time of the next general election. And yet here we are with the Labour Party going backwards. So that is what I was going to show you, and we are going to have words with it in a minute. We're going to find the remote control. It's down the back of the sofa somewhere, but you know, we'll get there. You know what it is? You know what it's like when you get a new app, don't you? It never quite goes right. That's what will happen now, but we will get it fixed.
You want to put your rating in the App Store or whatever.
It's a 1. It's a 1. I'll tell you that.
I think that's generous.
There we go. Thousands of results over the weekend, and we managed to get one to work. That's good.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know. We'll let you pay a licence fee for.
We'll let you give it a good kick, and we'll see you a bit later. You have it working for 7:30, yeah?
Promise. Guaranteed.
See you then, Lewis. Thank you.
As I said, just turn it on and off. That's what we're all told when it comes to computers.
The old-fashioned paperwork.
What you're seeing there is the piles of ballot papers that have been counted already. Now, we heard earlier that there are around 3 boxes still to be counted. The pile you'll see under the word Mortimer is the Conservative candidate there. And the expectation is, of course, that the Conservatives have taken Hartlepool. There has been a sourced statement from the Labour Party, we understand, saying, basically conceding defeat on this. And we're yet to hear from any of the parties officially, of course. But we will keep you updated with those results. But what you see, Conservative pile of ballot papers, the biggest one.
And what's striking as well is that the number of very small piles for the others. There's a suggestion that a lot of the other candidates, and there are many candidates, could lose their deposits there. So it looks like a two-horse race at the moment. Maybe only one clear winner.
Talking of races and winners and disappointment and swings, oh, dearie me.
I'm glad I haven't got a touch screen. I've just got a couple of simple images. Look.
Yeah, we were
Manchester
stay
United
away
flying.
from the touch screen. It is coming up to 6:45. Let's just show you what's happening in Hartlepool. Why? Well, we're waiting for the result of the by-election there. It has been a Labour seat since, 1964, and it's been up for grabs after the Labour MP Mike Hill announced his resignation with immediate effect in 2021 in March. Right, why are we interested in this? This is because, and this has been seen as a key seat that has, in all senses, we understand, has been lost to the Conservatives. Now, the Conservative candidate is Jill Mortimer, who's a farmer and local councillor in North Yorkshire. You can just see her over there. And we've been waiting for this result since around 5:30 this morning, and we've been told that we will be getting it. But this is a sign when you see the candidates in the hall. John mentioned earlier lots of parties throwing their hats into the ring, and you said losing their deposits. Just to explain, when you put yourself up as a candidate, you pay a deposit around £500, and if you don't get at least 5% of the vote, then you lose that money. So that's where that phrase comes from.
Yeah, and looking at the stacks of ballot papers we've seen on the tables at the side of the counters, it looks like a great big stack for the Conservative candidate, a smaller stack for the Labour candidate, and then really just a smattering across the others. We'll get the precise numbers later, but it does look like it has been a tussle between the two main parties.
Indeed. And the implication of this, of course, is on the leader of the Labour Party, Sir Keir Starmer, and whether or not he is able to reverse this trend that they saw in the last general election. The Conservatives win a lot of Labour stronghold seats, so-called red wall seats, and this being seen as another that is going. We're also keeping an eye on Nuneaton and Harlow as well. So we'll bring you all those results as they come through. It's going to be next 3 days, election-tastic results.
Fantastic. The map of the UK changing in places. What about the weather map? Let's see what Carol's... It's 5 to 7. We're still waiting for the result of the Hartlepool by-election, the first big headline result that we're expecting in a weekend full of results.
Indeed. Let's talk to the BBC's North East political editor, Richard Moss, who's inside, well, you're seeing the Mill House Leisure Centre. This is where all the final votes are being counted. Now, Richard, when we last spoke, I think you said there were 3 boxes still to be counted. How far have they got with those 3 boxes? I won't ask you the minutes past 7, I think, that we'll get the results.
I think they have counted all the votes. I think we are in the final stages here. I don't think there are any more to be counted. All they've been piled up there, and it's quite clear, you can see from here actually when I look, that the Conservative candidate Jill Mortimer has a massive pile on her table, much more than the Labour candidate who's come second, and much more than many of the other candidates. But we are waiting for that final declaration. They will get the candidates together, I think, check everything with them before they get them on stage. So it could be in the next few minutes, but certainly doesn't seem to be any more counting taking place.
OK, Richard, I know it's been a long night. It will soon be over, but we will not say imminently. Absolutely not. There is some movement in the Hartlepool Mill Hill Centre. Let's just hear, this is
doubtful ballot
perhaps the result being announced.
And can I also, at the same time, invite the media to come into the arena?
OK, so it's just organisation there of a very different type of election result. You saw Richard there as well talking about, the restrictions very, very different now, aren't they, because of COVID, so not as many people in the hall. We will bring you that result as soon as it comes.
Yeah, I think the counters have to leave before the agents and the politicians come in. Right, we'll bring that to you straight after 7. Time now to get the news, travel and breakfast weather where you're watching us this morning. See you in a sec.
Good Good morning from BBC London. I'm Victoria Hollins. Early this morning, Harlow in Essex became one of the first councils to declare the results of yesterday's voting in the local council elections. Labour lost control to the Conservatives after 9 years. The Tory councillors won 12 of the 13 seats being contested. Meanwhile, there was no significant change in Southend, which has also declared. It remains under no overall control. Thurrock also saw no change and was held by the Conservatives. Well, polls closed at 10 p.m. yesterday evening. The count for the London mayoral election starts in just a couple of minutes' time. The results expected over the weekend is taking longer than usual to come in because of COVID restrictions. Right, I'm back with the latest from the BBC London newsroom in half an hour. There is, of course, plenty more on our website. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Good morning. Welcome to Breakfast with John Kay and Naga Manchetti.
Good morning. Our headlines today. The Tories seem set for a stunning by-election victory in Hartlepool, the seat that's been a Labour stronghold for more than 50 years. We're going to have the result there any moment.
A long night of counting and a long history for Labour in this town on Teesside, but that's likely to come to an end in the next half hour.
Now, that is just one in a bumper set of local, regional and national elections involving tens of millions of voters across the country. We'll analyse what it all means.
I'm in Edinburgh. The big question here is whether the SNP will be returned again as the largest party, securing a fourth term in government. They would like to win an overall majority, which they say would strengthen their case for a second independence referendum.
In Wales, can any party chip away at the dominance that Labour's had here for more than 2 decades?
Good morning. Manchester United reached the Europa League final, but this one won't be an all-English affair as Arsenal miss their chances and miss out. Knocked out by Villarreal under their former manager as well.
Good morning. Today it's a chilly start to the day for some, a frosty one, and then we've got a day of sunshine and showers, some heavy and thundery with hail. And into the weekend, it turns warmer but wetter and windier. I'll have all the details coming up.
Good morning. We've been waiting for the result from Hartlepool now of the by-election. That's just due to be announced, with the Conservatives confident of a victory. The returning officer, they're just organising the candidates on the stage.
Yeah, they've been counting through the night in rather unusual COVID restrictions, with the tellers wearing gloves and visors and having to stay separated. But in the last few minutes, the candidates and their agents have been given the private briefing. They're told the result just a few moments beforehand to check the figures, and then they have to keep a poker face for this actual formal declaration by the returning officer on the stage.
Let's hear her now.
I, Denise McGuckin, being the acting returning officer for the election of a Member of Parliament for the Hartlepool constituency held the 6th of May 2021, do hereby give notice that the number of votes recorded for each candidate at the said election is as follows. David Bettany, Social Democratic Party, 104 votes. Nicholas Charles Ellsworth Delves, commonly known as the Incredible Flying Brick, for the official Monster Raving Loony Party, 108 votes.
Thank you.
Hilton Dawson, the North East Party, 163 votes. Gemma Muncaster, commonly known as Gemma Evans, for the Women's Equality Party, 140 votes. Rachel Sarah Featherstone, the Green Party candidate, 358 votes. Adam Gaines, Independent, 126 votes. Andrew Michael Hagan, Liberal Democrats, 349 votes. Stephen Jack, commonly known as Steve Jack, Freedom Alliance, no lockdowns, no curfews, 72 votes. Christopher Killick, commonly known as Chris Killick, 248 votes. Samantha Jane Lee, commonly known as Sam Lee, Independent, 2,904 votes. Claire Martin for the Heritage Party, 468 votes. Gillian Wendy Mortimer, commonly known as Jill Mortimer, Conservative Party candidate, 15,529. John Prescott, Reform UK, 368 votes. Thelma Doris Walker, Independent, 250 votes. William Ralph Ward-Jackson, commonly known as W. Ralph Ward-Jackson, Independent, 157 votes. And Paul Daniel Williams for the Labour Party, 8,589 votes. The number of ballot papers rejected was as follows: 61 voting for more candidates than a voter was entitled to, and 121 being unmarked or wholly void for uncertainty. I do hereby declare that Gillian Wendy Mortimer, commonly known as Jill Mortimer, is duly elected. Congratulations, Jill. Take this off now.
Thank you, Madam Returning Officer. Firstly, I want to thank the police and the council officers who have done an excellent job in ensuring that today's election and count went smoothly, especially given the difficult circumstances we've faced due to the coronavirus pandemic. I'd also like to thank all the candidates on the stage this evening. It's been a tough contest, but it's one that's been fought with dignity and respect. So thank you all. I'm incredibly proud of the campaign my team and I have run in Hartlepool. It's based on local issues of real concern to the community here. And I would like to thank all of the people of this great town who've responded so positively to it. I'm also immensely proud to be the first Conservative MP in Hartlepool for 57 years. Not only that, I am the first woman ever to be elected as MP for this town. It's a truly historic result and a momentous day. Labour have taken people in Hartlepool for granted for too long. I heard this time and time again on the doorstep. People have had enough. And now, through this result, the people have spoken and they've made it clear it's time for change. People voted for that positive change, for jobs and investment, and it's exactly what I'm going to deliver. For now, I just want to say a few more thank yous. Directly to those people who voted for me, who put their faith in me, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I'm going to work tirelessly for Hartlepool and I will not let you down. I will not fail you. I'll work with both the Conservative government and the Teesside Valley Mayor, and I very much hope it will once again be Ben Houchen and we can celebrate with him again tomorrow. My thanks also go to CCHQ, everyone in my fantastic campaign team, and all those who supported me throughout this election, including my agent and very proudly my friend Diane Clark OBE, and of course the wonderful Hashon Cohan. And of course my heartfelt thanks go to all of my family. They know who they all are. They're more than just my blood relatives, for their unwavering support. And finally, election campaigns are only made possible by hard-working volunteers, people who are willing to sacrifice their time, pound the streets with us in, as we've seen this time, baking sun, frozen letterboxes and hail. Political parties rely on the selflessness of these volunteers, and without them our democracies and communities would be so much poorer. So thank you all once again. Thank you.
As Jill Mortimer, the newly elected MP for Hartlepool, a Conservative for the first time in the town's history. At the last election, Just 18 months ago, Labour held that seat with a majority of 3,500. The Conservatives now have a majority there of just under 7,000.
Yeah, some interesting points here, and we'll be talking to a member of the Labour Party a little later on. Steve Reid we'll be talking to get his reaction on this rather significant defeat for Labour. Just some points to bring you. It's the third time in 40 years that a governing party has won a by-election. Just to put this in some kind of context in why Hartlepool is being focused upon now and what this will mean for the leader of the opposition, the Labour Party, Sir Keir Starmer. Well, we'll be talking about that, of course, throughout the morning. Our political correspondent, Chris Mason, is in Hartlepool for us this morning. And just the majority, or the majority of nearly 7,000, which compares to Labour's narrow majority of half of that in 2019. It's pretty significant, isn't it?
Yeah, make no mistake, Naga, this is an earthquake in Hartlepool. It's 56 years since people in this town woke up to a Conservative MP. They are doing that this morning and doing it for the Conservatives with a huge majority, a majority of 6,940, a 16% swing from Labour to the Conservatives. And remember, the Conservatives have been in national government for 11 years. Now, we can take half a step back and say that at the general election in 2019, the Brexit Party here were a big voice. 1 in 4 voters in 2019 here voted for the Brexit Party. That party has shrivelled and rebranded, and so it didn't need that many Brexit Party supporters to switch across to the Conservatives for the Conservatives to win. Nonetheless, the Conservatives winning, frankly, by a country mile. Jill Mortimer polling 15,500 votes. Paul Williams, her Labour rival, managing around about half that, 8,500. Already reaction coming in, and as you might expect, the co-chairman of the Conservative Party, Amanda Milling, in just the last couple of minutes, putting out a statement describing it, as she puts it, as a historic result, saying that she is delighted that the people of Hartlepool have put their faith in Jill Mortimer, the Conservative winner, and the Conservatives will deliver on their priorities, as they say, to bring change, investment and jobs to Hartlepool as the town deserves, as they put it. There's a curiosity here. The Conservatives acting as insurgents, kicking Labour as the establishment, despite the fact that the Conservatives have been in government for over a decade at Westminster. But of course, because of the history around Labour and this town, an MP here from the Labour Party solidly since 1964, then they can present themselves as the insurgents against an establishment Labour Party, despite the fact that the national picture obviously appears rather different. Very, very wounding this for Sir Keir Starmer. He elected as the new Labour leader a year ago, trying to haul Labour back from that historically crushing defeat in 2019, the worst election result for them since 1935. And yet this result this morning, Naga, suggests that they have not yet hit the bottom.
Chris, also, I mean, I'm just looking at comments about this. You mentioned, obviously, the pressure on Sir Keir Starmer. Momentum, of course, which is the left-wing campaign group, has had much to say about the Labour Party and, of course, influence. Its co-chair has said this result is a disaster. Starmer's strategy of isolating the left and replacing meaningful policy with empty buzzwords has comprehensively failed. The attacks are going to start coming in, and Keir Starmer has said that although expectations were not for 12 to 13 months for the Labour Party to turn itself, its image around, he would take responsibility for this.
Yeah, and I think what you get, what you can conclude from the words that you've just brought us, Nago, just a matter of minutes after this by-election result, is that whilst this result won't change the maths at Westminster, this is just 1 seat out of 650, it will change the mood. You can hear the buoyancy in the quote I brought you from the co-chair of the Conservative Party. You can hear the recriminations that are already beginning within the Labour Party. Now, there are some on the left of the Labour Party, loyal to Jeremy Corbyn, who've frankly been itching to be able to criticise Sir Keir Starmer, and this result clearly will give them plenty of opportunity to do that. Those around Keir Starmer this morning, not flinching and trying to make excuses. They talk about the need to redouble their efforts to regain the trust of voters. If there was a word retreble, they'd perhaps be better off using that, because the challenge that they face, frankly, is absolutely colossal.
Chris, thanks so much. Chris Mason there for us in Hartlepool.
So, just to recap that result, the Conservatives have taken the seat of Hartlepool in the by-election there, the first time they've won it. Another blue brick in the so-called Red Wall, which used to stay unsmashed all the way across northern England and in North Wales. Keir Starmer's first real big test as leader of the opposition. And Hartlepool, he has lost. We're joined now by Labour's Shadow Local Government Secretary, Steve Reid. What went wrong, Mr. Reid?
Well, good morning. I mean, first of all, can I congratulate Jill Mortimer on her victory? But it was, for me as a Labour Party member, absolutely shattering to see a Conservative MP elected in a place like Hartlepool after nearly 50 years. And I think what this shows is that although we have started to change since the cataclysm of the last general election, that change has clearly not gone far enough in order to win back the trust of the voters, and we've just seen that in spades, haven't we, in Hartlepool?
You say that the change has not gone far enough. This suggests that maybe voters don't like the way that you've already changed, that they just don't like what they've seen so far, don't want any more.
I think it would be too much to draw that conclusion from this one result, devastating though it is. We're going to see a lot more results, aren't we, throughout today and Saturday and over the weekend, from elections right across the country. So we'll have a clearer picture at the end of that period. And I suspect the results are going to be patchy. Certainly from my door knocking, places like Sheffield, Nottingham, Bristol, Milton Keynes, Hertfordshire, the reaction on the doorstep to me as a Labour campaigner has been a lot warmer than it has been in recent years, but that isn't enough if it's not translating into votes. I think people understand that the leader has changed. They don't understand that the party has changed, because we haven't yet done enough to prove that. So the job of work in front of us all over the next few weeks, led by Keir, will be to get out there, re-engage with the British public and reconnect our party, so that we can show that our party can deliver on the aspirations and ambitions that people have for themselves, their families and their communities.
But I mean, he's been in position now as leader of Labour for a year. He's led this campaign very much in Hartlepool and across the country. You say it's a shattering result. It's a devastating vote for Labour. And, are there not questions now about him and the direction in which he's taking his party?
Keir's been leader for a year, as you say, and it's been an extraordinarily unusual year, hasn't it, given that Keir's not yet been able to give a speech in front of a live audience or shake a live voter's hand because of the restrictions of the pandemic. And Keir never made any bones about the fact that we had an electoral mountain to climb after December 2019. That was our worst result for 85 years. We have to win 124 seats back at the next general election simply to draw level with the Conservatives, and that's more seats than any party has ever won back in a single general election. It was always going to take more than a year to make this change. Now,
you say a mountain to climb. Sorry, you say a mountain to climb. Hartlepool should not be a mountain for the Labour Party, should it?
If you dig into the results there last time, I think you said it earlier in your introduction on this show, the Brexit Party got around 25% of the vote last time, and the Conservatives got nearly 30%. What's happened is the Brexit Party vote has collapsed to the Conservatives. Now, I'm not using that as an excuse. Those are simply facts, because at this point, you would hope that an opposition party would be winning, retaining seats like Hartlepool, and we manifestly haven't. But talking to voters, one of the things they like about the change over the last year is we have now a leader that people see as a credible alternative Prime Minister. What they don't yet understand is how the party is changing and what our future offer will be. People understand we have a new leader. They do not understand that the party has changed, because, frankly, the party hasn't changed enough. The issue is not that we've changed too much. It's that we need to drive change harder and faster if we're going to win back the broken trust that has been broken over many, many years between too many of the British people and the Labour Party.
Momentum on the left have already put out a statement in the last couple of minutes saying you did better in Hartlepool with a more left-wing Corbyn agenda? I mean, you say that Keir Starmer is credible as a future Prime Minister, but not apparently in a place like Hartlepool that you have always held.
I think anybody looking at this objectively would find it very difficult to say that Labour did well in December 2019. You know, our worst result for 85 years, and that was after 10 years of what is quite possibly the worst Conservative government in my adult lifetime. I'm very comfortable that we now have a leader that the country could see as an alternative Prime Minister. The problem is the Labour Party itself. We have not yet changed the Labour Party enough for people to feel able to go out and trust it with their children's futures. And over the next weeks and months, the job of work we will have will be to bring the Labour Party back home to Britain. Keir will lead it. The rest of us will support him. But we will work tirelessly night and day to rebuild the shattered trust.
OK, Steve Reid, Shadow Local Government Secretary, giving the first reaction there to Labour losing that seat in Hartlepool. Thanks for joining us on Breakfast.
Let's go to Hartlepool, where the BBC's North East political editor, Richard Moss, is inside the Millhouse Leisure Centre. Empty now, Richard?
Yes. Always a bit sad, isn't it, when these things end? They end rather quickly after all the hours of counting.
So the result pretty much as expected, cleared out obviously now, but we're just getting the reaction coming through. And just explain why this is so significant in terms of what Hartlepool is like and has been obviously a stronghold for the Labour Party for half a century.
Well, there's two significances, aren't there? I mean, number one is the accepted political wisdom is that governments lose by-elections and oppositions win them. In this case, a government that's been in office for 11 years has taken a seat from the opposition. And Hartlepool is in an area where, you know, Labour have been losing for a while now. They lost 7 seats in the North East at the 2019 general election, some very close to this seat. They lost a mayoral election 4 years ago to the Conservatives for the Tees Valley area, which covers this area. They're likely to lose it again when those results come out later today. So there is just a sense here that a place that was a heartland that Labour could rely on, it can no longer rely on. It seems to be drifting away. And of course, the other significance is that in 2019, the party could blame it on Brexit. They could blame it on Jeremy Corbyn being unpopular. This time, they believe those factors have gone away, and they might be wrong about Brexit. Perhaps Brexit's still a factor. 70% of people in Hartlepool voted for it. But they can't blame Jeremy Corbyn, really. So they've got to look at themselves and say, what is it about our message that isn't cutting through to voters in places like Hartlepool?
OK, Richard, thanks so much. Rich Morris there for us.
22 minutes past 7. So the first big headlines coming from Hartlepool on Breakfast this morning. But that's just the start, because counting for the Scottish Parliament and the Welsh Senedd elections, they begin in, a couple of hours' time at 9 o'clock this morning. We'll get the picture from Ione Wells in Cardiff in a moment. But first, let's go to our Scotland correspondent, Lorna Gordon, in Edinburgh. And Lorna, independence has been the big issue over the election there. How confident are the SNP that they're going to get a majority of some kind that will allow them to push for a second independence referendum?
Well, look, I think nobody doubts that the SNP are going to be returned as the largest party here in Scotland, that they will have a 4th consecutive term in office. But the question is how big they will win. The opinion polls suggest they're going to win. I think the other parties would agree that Nicola Sturgeon's going to be First Minister again. But the magic number that they have to reach to win an overall majority is 65. And whether the SNP can do that on their own is far less clear. There's less data about how they've been campaigning on the doorsteps this time around because of COVID. The bad weather here yesterday will have affected turnout. But I do think, though, that the SNP are pretty confident that if they don't win an overall majority on their own, they will win an overall pro-independence majority. They will have an overall pro-independence majority with the help of the Greens. And they say that that will give them a strong case to push for that second referendum on Scottish independence going forward.
OK, Lorna, thank you very much indeed. Let's cross to Cardiff instead. Labour in Wales looking to maintain the power that they've held since devolution began in 1999. Ione is there for us this morning. What should we be looking out for in those Welsh results, Ione?
Well, I mean, the first thing to say is that the context of this election is just so important. The last year has just shone a massive, massive spotlight on devolution and on the Welsh Government, because every day people have been seeing Welsh ministers make decisions about things like health, about education, about business support, things that really, really impact all of our lives. And as a result of that, the Welsh Labour leader, Mark Drakeford, has had his profile massively boosted in the last year. He's been on TV giving press conferences. Polls have even suggested that more people here have an opinion on him than they do on the UK Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer. So Labour have that in their advantage. The big question, though, is going to be how much can any opposition parties chip away at the dominance that Labour have had here since devolution began. And the key battleground to watch out for here is going to be the northeast of Wales. That's where the Conservatives made a number of gains from Labour at the 2019 general election on a UK level. Also a couple of seats in the south where the Tories have increased support over the years. There's a couple of seats where Plaid Cymru and Labour are in direct competition with each other too. But in the main, this is a defensive election for Labour against the Tories. The final thing to remember as well is that coalitions, minority governments in Wales are totally normal. We've never had a party win an outright majority here. So if by this evening that's the way the numbers are looking, parties are going to start doing their sums, having a think about what deals they may or may not be willing to put on the table.
Ione, thank you very much indeed. Ione live for us in Cardiff. We have correspondents all over the UK covering those elections, not just this morning but throughout the weekend, because COVID means the results are going to be much more spread out this time, aren't they?
Indeed. The news just in the last few minutes, of course, the Conservatives have taken the Hartlepool seat from the Labour Party. They've voted in Jill Mortimer, who is the first female Conservative MP, the first female MP for the constituency, beating her rival, closest rival, Labour's Paul Williams, by nearly 7,000 votes. Now, the Labour Party at the last election in Hartlepool won by just 3,500 votes and has now lost by 7,000 votes. And we've seen a swing from Labour to the Conservatives of 16%. Lots of questions now being raised about Sir Keir Starmer's role as leader of the Labour Party and the party's strategy, whether or not it's been successful. Amanda Milling, Conservative Party co-chair, is going to join us in just a few minutes.
And we'll get Lewis Goodall, who's going to give us all the latest from his hopefully his touchscreen's working now. He had a nightmare about an hour ago with his big telly pressing the buttons to give us the results, and it all got jammed. So he switched it off, he's reset it. We'll try it out again in a few minutes' time.
Find out what's happening wherever you are. See you shortly.
Good morning from BBC London. I'm Victoria Hollins. Harlow in Essex became one of the first councils to declare the results of yesterday's voting in the local council elections. Labour lost control to the Conservatives, who took 7 seats. Political correspondent Andrew Sinclair was there and sent this a short time ago.
Harlow has been a Labour council for the last 9 years, but this morning it's back in Conservative control after the party won 12 of the 13 seats being contested. The council leader, one of the casualties. Concerns about bin collections and the state of the high street were probably a factor. Internal Labour divisions didn't help. But the Conservatives say that the vaccination programme kept coming up on the doorsteps. And in a town which has been badly hit by COVID, that's probably the main reason for this Conservative success.
Meanwhile, in Southend, there was no big change as the council remains under no overall control, and Thurrock was held by the Conservatives. Well, for a roundup of everything you need to know about the elections, you can use our simple guide where you can find out what the election means for you. You can find it on our website or use the BBC News app. Well, polls closed at 10 p.m. yesterday evening. The count for the London mayoral election started a short time ago. The results expected over the weekend. It'll take longer than usual to come in. It's because of COVID restrictions. Nice. Right, I'm back with the latest from the BBC London newsroom in an hour. There's always plenty more on our website. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Good morning. You're watching Breakfast with John Kay and Naga Manchetti.
And it's a very eventful morning in British politics, because in the last half hour, the Conservatives have taken the seat of Hartlepool in a by-election for the very first time. Jill Mortimer elected there. She got 15,529 votes, defeating the Labour candidate, Dr. Paul Williams, by a majority of nearly 7,000. It's been described as a political earthquake, an astonishing turnaround.
Here was her acceptance speech from just a few moments ago.
I'm incredibly proud of the campaign my team and I have run in Hartlepool. It's based on local issues of real concern to the community here. And I would like to thank all of the people of this great town who've responded so positively to it. I'm also immensely proud to be the first Conservative MP in Hartlepool for 57 years. Not only that, I am the first woman ever to be elected as MP for this town. It's a truly historic result and a momentous day. Labour have taken people in Hartlepool for granted for too long. I heard this time and time again on the doorstep. People have had enough. And now, through this result, the people have spoken and they've made it clear it's time for change. People voted for that positive change, for jobs and investment, and it's exactly what I'm going to deliver.
We're joined now by Amanda Milling, who's the co-chair of the Conservative Party. Amanda Milling, hello. You are smiling this morning, obviously congratulating Jill Mortimer.
Absolutely. Good morning, Naga. And yes, I'm absolutely thrilled for Jill Mortimer and the team who've been working so hard over the last few weeks in Hartlepool to get her elected. And it was, such a fantastic win. And, she's campaigned so hard. And I'm confident she'll be an incredibly strong voice for the people of Hartlepool down here in Parliament.
Earlier this week, the Prime Minister actually downplayed the likelihood of the Conservative Party winning Hartlepool from Labour. What do you think drove this? Because there's been lots of conversations about whether it was Labour's failings or the fact that there was a hangover from the Brexit vote that went naturally towards Conservatives.
So it's highly unusual for governing parties to win by-elections, and particularly opposition parties. But I think the message that Jill took to the people of Hartlepool was one of change. The people of Hartlepool felt they'd been taken for granted by Labour. They'd been a Labour seat for 57 years. And in terms of the Brexit vote, they could see that, in 2019, the Prime Minister made a promise to get Brexit done. And that's what we did last year, bearing in mind that they voted 69.5% for Brexit back in 2016. So they could see that we, as Conservatives, are delivering.
How much has the vaccine rollout has contributed to the swing towards the Tories?
So I think in Jill's acceptance speech, you also saw her talking about the local issues that she was fighting on. And I've been on the campaign trail with Jill in Hartlepool, but also around the country. And so many people I spoke to on the doorstep would be talking about those local issues. But, in terms of the vaccine rollout, it has been a huge success and it keeps going. But that's been a massive effort on the part of the government, the NHS, and a huge army of volunteers.
What have you been concerned about when it comes to these local elections, to these regional elections? What have you been concerned about when it came to accusations of cronyism, to accusations of sleaze within the Conservative Party? Has that affected your thinking and concern about how people will vote and how they view the Conservative Party?
Going into these elections, the biggest issue we faced was the fact that this was a very high watermark in terms of elections and in terms of local elections. If we look at many of the ones which we were fighting yesterday, they were won in 2017, where we gained 550 seats. So we had a lot of work to do in terms of being able to defend these seats. Now, let's be honest, it's really early doors in terms of the results from the counts. The counts will be going on for several days now. But, it was those local issues with the issues that we were fighting on and campaigning hard on. And you can see with the result with Jill up in Hartlepool, that's what people really responded to.
So do you think that the accusations of cronyism and sleaze have affected the Conservative Party or can be ignored?
So I've been knocking on many doors, and the focus has very much been on those local issues. I remember last week being up in Sandwell, and a gentleman was telling me about the issues with overhanging trees and some potholes and some youths on their bikes. These are the issues that really matter to people. And in fact, I think that over the last year, as everyone's been following the rules and staying at home and staying local, they've become very much aware of those local issues.
Amanda Millen, Conservative Party co-chair, thank you very much.
Of course, this is just the start, isn't it? It's not just Hartlepool. It might be what we're talking about this morning because it's just come out, but more results expected right through the weekend. 48 million people across Britain had the chance to have their say in that bumper day of elections. And you know that feeling when you get a new bit of technology, a new bit of kit, and it doesn't quite work?
I don't, but I know Lewis Goodall does.
Have you got it working, Lewis?
Well, we're about to find out, aren't we, John? Let's try and see. Yeah, let's have a look at that Hartlepool result. When we spoke about an hour ago, obviously we didn't know the result now, and here it is. It is a sensational result. It was expected, although probably not expected to be a margin like that. It's nearly 7,000 votes. The Conservative vote has basically doubled since the general election of 2019, and Jill Mortimer becomes the first Conservative MP for Hartlepool since 1964, the first female MP for Hartlepool as well. You can see here, we're going back, Labour 2019, Labour 2017, Labour 2015, 10, 05. As I say, you could go all the way back since the seat was basically created in 1974 and its precursor in 1964. It's been a Labour seat, no longer. It's a Conservative seat, joining a whole clutch of other Conservative seats in the Teesside area, seats and seats in the northeast more generally as well. But of course, as you say today, John, it isn't just about Hartlepool, though of course Hartlepool will send the shivers down the spine of many Labour MPs in a similar position, because what has happened here is you can basically see with what's going on in Hartlepool here, you can see 52% of the vote, huge proportion of the vote, but last time, what we call here now the Reform Party, but it was the Brexit Party before that, you've basically had a straight transfer from Brexit Party supporters, 25%, over to the Conservative Party, and that has taken them to that stonking majority of nearly 7,000. But the thing is, it's not just Hartlepool that is in that situation. There's a whole clutch of other seats in the North and Midlands, seats like Doncaster or Easington or Barnsley or Normanton and Pontefract, all those sorts of seats which have now got very small Labour majorities but have the equivalent of that big Brexit Party majorities. Now, if the Conservatives can repeat the trick, what they've done in Hartlepool at the next general election, then you won't be talking about Boris Johnson's majority going down or a Labour Party majority, far from it. You could be talking about Boris Johnson's majority going up, getting into three figures. And you can see that is what is going to really worry Conservative Labour MPs tonight. With a swing like that, 16%, truly enormous. But it isn't just about, of course, it isn't just about what's been going on in Hartlepool. It's also about the local elections more generally. Because if it was just Hartlepool, Labour could say, well, it's a very Leave voting constituency. It's just one constituency. We're looking to advance in other places. The problem is we haven't had that many local authority election results just yet, but we have had a few. And look at this. You can already see the Conservatives up 49 councillors all in all. Labour down 53. Greens up by 5, by the way. Keep an eye on that through the course of the day. I've got a feeling that could go up and up. Greens having quite a good night in different parts of the country so far. But this isn't what you should be seeing. In the 11th year of a Conservative government, of any government, you should be seeing that the other way around. Labour should be on the advance, Conservative on the retreat. And yet, in this case, it's anything but. You're actually seeing instead the Conservatives, the governing party, on the advance. And let me show you why that is and how that is playing out. In councils like Nuneaton and Bedworth. Nuneaton and Bedworth, a classic marginal sort of place. It was a Labour council actually until 2018. You can see there it was Labour, Labour, Labour. Then it went into no overall control. The Conservatives have gained it tonight. And look at this. 10 seats Labour were defending. The Conservatives have taken all 10. And they've largely done that as a result of the fact the last time that these seats were being contested, UKIP was still a strong presence before the Brexit referendum of 2016, and basically the Conservatives have just absorbed much of that UKIP vote with a bit of Labour vote on top of that as well. We can see that very same thing happening in other places as well. Harlow, a Conservative gain. That was a Labour council before last night. There you go, 20 seats for the Conservatives. 7 gains, 7 Labour losses. Exactly the same story. And we can look again in other parts of the country as well. We've got Redditch here in the West Midlands. Again, was a Labour council until 2018, was a Labour seat until 2010. 25 seats now on the council for the Conservatives. 7 Conservative gains, 7 Labour losses, and you can see exactly, just to complete the quadruplet that we've got up here, Thurrock as well, exactly the same story. 6 Conservative gains. In this case, actually 6 UKIP losses, because UKIP was still a strong presence on the council there. But there you've basically got all 25 seats, I think, on the council. No, so 29 seats on the council now are Conservative. So there you have it. Same story across the country so far. Just a few councils in, but we're seeing what's happened. We're seeing the Conservative basically take that UKIP or Brexit Party vote and bring a coalescence, if you like, of the centre-right together. All of that vote, and in many cases, the Labour Party vote is just not strong enough, even though it has, in some cases, they've had good majorities in certain seats. With a UKIP and Conservative votes coming together, it just isn't enough. And I think that is going to be one of the big themes that we see throughout the country today.
Lewis, I don't know whether there's more relief at Conservative Central Office or with you that your screen is working now. But,
oh, believe me, it's with me.
Well done, expertly navigated. See you again later. Thank you.
Done a lot of that this morning, where you say it's been 50 years, or since Hartlepool, has been a Labour stronghold, and now it's gone to the Conservatives. It's always interesting having markers, and they always come in like quarters of a century. I find, Mike, 50 years here, 25 years, 75
History.
years.
It's all context, isn't it?
It
Same
is.
with the football.
Good morning. You're watching Breakfast with John Kay and Naga Munchetti.
Good morning. Our headlines today.
I do hereby declare that Gillian Wendy Mortimer, commonly known as Jill Mortimer, is duly elected. Congratulations, Jill.
For the Tories, they win the Hartlepool by-election. The seat has been a Labour stronghold for more than 50 years.
People have had enough, and now through this result, the people have spoken and they've made it clear it's time for change.
The result is another Conservative gain in the north of England, raising questions about the Labour Party's direction under Sir Keir Starmer.
A crushing defeat for Labour and a stunning victory for the Conservatives, who have an MP here for the first time since the 1960s.
And that's just the start. One result in a bumper set of local, regional and national elections involving tens of millions of voters across Britain.
Here in Scotland, the big question is whether the SNP will be returned for a 4th consecutive term in power. Opinion polls suggest they will, and they say that if there is an overall majority for independence here at the Parliament, it strengthens their case for a post-pandemic referendum on independence.
In Wales, Labour have been in power since devolution began, so the big question is, can any of the other parties chip away at their dominance?
Good morning. Green means go, but where to? Travel companies and holidaymakers await the government's green list of destinations. It's expected later, so I look at what tests and forms you'll need for a break in the sun this year.
Good morning. It's a chilly start to the day, and for some of us there's some frost around. For most it's a day of sunshine and showers, some of those heavy with hail and thunder, leading us into a wet and windy weekend, but also a much milder one. I'll have all the details coming up.
Good morning to you. Welcome. It's Friday the 7th of May and our top story is that in the last hour, Hartlepool has elected its first Conservative MP in almost 50 years in that hotly contested by-election. The seat's been held by Labour, a Labour stronghold since it was created in 1974.
We can take you through the results in more detail. There were 16 candidates in Hartlepool. Jill Mortimer was elected with more than 15,000 votes. Now, the Labour candidate, Paul Williams, received more than 8,000 votes, giving the Conservatives a majority of just under 7,000, 6,940. It means the swing from Labour to Conservative was 16%. Our political correspondent, Jonathan Blake, has more.
I do hereby declare that Gillian Wendy Mortimer, commonly known as Jill Mortimer, is duly elected. Congratulations, Jill.
The moment of victory. A Conservative MP elected in a former Labour stronghold. The winning candidate, elected by some margin, said she was proud to break Labour's long run here and argued it was proof her opponents had lost touch.
Labour have taken people in Hartlepool for granted for too long. I heard this time and time again on the doorstep. People have had enough. And now, through this result, the people have spoken and they've made it clear it's time for change.
It had been a long night. A high turnout meant careful counting, but it soon became clear the Conservatives would win. A blow-up Boris Johnson appeared in Hartlepool to mark the Tories' expected victory, proving the Prime Minister can command support post-Brexit and leaving Labour promising to listen and learn.
For me as a Labour Party member, absolutely shattering to see a Conservative MP elected in a place like Hartlepool after nearly 50 years. And I think what this shows is that although we have started to change since the cataclysm of the last general election, that change has clearly not gone far enough in order to win back the trust of the voters. And we've just seen that in spades, haven't we, in Hartlepool?
Something else for Conservatives to celebrate. The party took control of Nuneaton and Bedworth Council in Warwickshire, one of 143 being contested across England.
People respect what the Prime Minister has done during this pandemic. They think the vaccine rollout is phenomenal, and they think that given all the challenges that we've faced, that the Conservative government, the Prime Minister, has done a really good job in difficult circumstances, and many of those people on the doorsteps have been right behind him.
In Essex, another win for the Conservatives, taking Harlow Council from Labour. In almost every layer of local government, counties, boroughs, districts and more, almost 5,000 council seats are up for election. Labour have held on to several councils in the North East, including Newcastle and Gateshead, but saw their stronghold in Sunderland eroded by the Tories. The counting continues in Cornwall, where, like many places, they'll be tallying the ballots for many hours yet. In London, Labour's Sadiq Khan is seeking a second term as mayor, one of 13 city and regional mayors up for election. The Conservatives hoping to hang on to the West Midlands, Labour eyeing up West Yorkshire. Those are some of the many, many more results to come from these elections held in the shadow of a pandemic. Slowly, across England, a renewed political picture is emerging. Jonathan Blake, BBC News.
Well, the beginning of that picture emerging is Hartlepool, isn't it, where we've had that by-election result this morning. And Chris Mason is there for us this morning. Chris, how significant is this? The Conservatives winning, but also that Labour defeat in the northeast of England.
Yeah, morning to you, John. Look, let's be clear. There's a temptation for people like me on mornings like this to get dreadfully excited about a single by-election result in a parliament of 650 seats. Does it change the maths at Westminster? No, it doesn't. But does it change the mood? And the answer to that is yes, it does, because this is not an outlier. This is a pattern that's been emerging for a while, of which this is the latest bit of evidence. The phrase that's often been thrown around is what's known as the red wall, those seats in the English Midlands and the north of England, towns that were consistently Labour for generations, that on election night barely anyone outside the towns in question would pay any attention to, because they were chalked up as rock-solid Labour seats. And Hartlepool was a classic example of that kind of seat. And yet, it's further evidence that the Conservatives have managed to chip away and claim a seat that has had a Labour MP since the average price of a house in the UK was only £3,000, where Beatlemania was sweeping America back in 1964. That's the last time people here woke up to having a Conservative MP. They have one in Jill Mortimer this morning. And what is striking is that this wasn't just a victory, it was a big victory for the Conservatives, winning by around 8,000 votes, a 16% swing from Labour to the Conservatives. And of course, the Conservatives have been in government for 11 years already. That's not what's meant to happen. And the Conservatives managing to buck a long-standing political trend.
OK, Chris Mason for us live in Hartlepool. And this is just the start, isn't it, of a busy weekend?
Yeah, very much so indeed. Counting will be taking place across Britain later. Following a day of bumper elections, we're going to get the picture from Scotland and Wales in just a moment. And in England, there are more than 140 councils with results to declare. Our political correspondent Adam Fleming is in Westminster for us this morning. Adam, good to see you. I mean, Chris touched upon it, didn't it? It's about the tone, almost, not almost as much as the actual map of, seats as we look at it.
Morning, you two. Yes, lots of the things that people are saying about the result in Hartlepool, where there was a parliamentary by-election, can also be applied to other bits of England where there aren't by-elections, but there are elections for the local councils. So, and there we're seeing this big pattern of the Conservatives doing again what they did at the general election in 2019, which is making inroads into previously Labour-held areas that supported Brexit in quite a big way, which is basically what Hartlepool is. So there were lots of reasons beyond Brexit that this is happening, and Amanda Milling, the Conservative Party co-chair, spelt some of them out.
The message that Jill took to the people of Hartlepool was one of change. The people of Hartlepool felt they'd been taken for granted by Labour. It'd been a Labour seat for 57 years. And in terms of the Brexit vote, they could see that, in 2019, the Prime Minister made a promise to get Brexit done. And that's what we did last year, bearing in mind that they voted 69.5% for Brexit back in 2016. So they could see that we, as Conservatives, are delivering.
Now, Labour sources are not trying to spin their way out of this. They're taking it on the chin and accepting that they've still got quite a big mountain to climb. And the person who had to talk about the size of that mountain this morning was the shadow local government spokesperson, Steve Reid. And listen to him carefully, because he says the problem isn't Keir Starmer, the problem is the Labour Party.
I'm very comfortable that we now have a leader that the country could see as an alternative Prime Minister. The problem is the Labour Party itself. We have not yet changed the Labour Party enough for people to feel able to go out and trust it with their and their children's futures. And over the next weeks and months, the job of work we will have will be to bring the Labour Party back home to Britain. Keir will lead it. The rest of us will support him. But we will work tirelessly night and day to rebuild the shattered trust.
Now, continuing to pursue Keir Starmer's plan puts him on a bit of a collision course with some of his more left-wing MPs in the Labour Party, who are already being quite critical on social media and on the airwaves this morning. So it'll be interesting to see how that battle evolves in the next few months. A few other things to say quickly. I'm noticing a lot of support for the Greens in some places. Now, that's not the same as a general election, it's local elections, but that's an interesting thing to notice as well. And I also just wonder, if we were chatting tomorrow lunchtime, that's when we'll get the Scottish Parliament results. And that is about the fate of the entire United Kingdom rather than the fate of the Labour Party. So I think that might be the thing that dominates the conversations then.
Absolutely. And we're not ignoring it today either, Adam, as well. No, I know you're not accusing us of it as well. Lovely to see you, Adam. Keep busy this weekend. No choice.
In fact, let's deal with that right now, because counting for the Scottish Parliament and the Welsh Senedd begin at 9 o'clock this morning, so 45 minutes before that socially distanced counting gets underway. We'll get the picture from Ione Wells in Cardiff in a moment. But first, let's go to Edinburgh. Lorna Gordon is there for us this morning. Independence has been a huge issue through the campaign, hasn't it, Lorna? And I guess the result will determine whether or not the SNP can go for that second referendum.
Yeah, the campaign has been fought on post-COVID recovery and the Constitution, so the question of Scottish independence. I think everybody here in Scotland feels pretty certain that the SNP are going to be returned to a fourth consecutive term in power here at Holyrood. The opinion polls suggest it. I don't even think the opposition parties doubt it, that Nicola Sturgeon will remain as First Minister. But the question is by how much they win. Will they have a combined majority of pro-independence parties? Will they win an outright majority. The magic number for that is 65 MSPs out of the 129. Or will there be what's called a supermajority, which is what Alba have been campaigning on? That's the party led by the former First Minister Alex Salmond. The SNP's line is that if there is a pro-independence majority, so the SNP with the Greens here at Holyrood, that leaves them in a strong position to argue for a post-pandemic referendum on Scottish independence. It'll be some time yet till we find out what the results are here in Scotland. 2 days of counting. They'll start coming in at lunchtime, but it's really tomorrow when the final result will start to become clear.
OK, I hope you had a good night's sleep last night, Lorna. You're going to be working hard through the weekend, aren't you? Good luck to you. Let's cross to Wales, to Cardiff. Of course, Labour in Wales looking to hold on to power. They've held it there since devolution began in 1999. Ione Wells is there for us this morning. And Ione, what are you going to be looking out for as these results start coming in?
Well, John, I mean, this is really the COVID election. It's going to be really, really interesting to see whether or not turnout has been increased by the fact that the last year has just shone this huge spotlight on devolution, because every day people have been seeing Welsh ministers making decisions about health, about education, about business support, things that really, really impact all of our lives. And that has just rocketed the profile of Mark Drakeford, the Welsh Labour leader, because polls have repeatedly suggested higher support for his handling of the pandemic here in Wales compared to Boris Johnson's handling of the pandemic in England. So Labour have that in their favour. But as the party that has been in power here since devolution began, the big question is going to be how much, if any, can those opposition parties chip away at their dominance. And the key battlegrounds to watch out for here are going to be the northeast of Wales, where the Tories made a number of gains from Labour at the 2019 general election in the so-called Red Wall. Also a couple of areas where Plaid Cymru and Labour are in direct competition, but by and large, this is a defensive election for Labour against the Tories. Now, final thing to remember is that no party here has ever got an outright majority, so coalitions, minority governments are completely normal. If it's looking that way by this evening, then parties will have to start doing their sums and having a think about what deals they might be willing to put on the table with others.
Ione, thank you very much indeed. Calculator at the ready. We'll catch up later. Thank you.
Smaller numbers to deal with for Carol on
Too
the weather.
small.
Yeah, they're too small. Your numbers are too small, Carol.
They are going up this weekend, though, Naga.
OK.
Good morning, everybody.
It's just coming up to 28 minutes past 8. It's time to find out what's happening in terms of news, travel, weather, wherever you are this morning.
Good morning from BBC London. I'm Victoria Hollins. Harlow in Essex became one of the first councils to declare the results of yesterday's voting in the local council elections. Labour lost control to the Conservatives, who took 7 seats. Political correspondent Andrew Sinclair was there.
Harlow has been a Labour council for the last 9 years, but this morning it's back in Conservative control after the party won 12 of the 13 seats being contested. The council leader, one of the casualties. Concerns about bin collections and the state of the high street were probably a factor. Internal Labour divisions didn't help. But the Conservatives say that the vaccination programme kept coming up on the doorsteps. And in a town which has been badly hit by COVID, that's probably the main reason for this Conservative success.
Meanwhile, in Southend, there was no big change as the council remains under no overall control. Thurrock also was held by the Conservatives. For a roundup of everything you need to know about the elections, you can use our really simple guide where you can find out what the election means for you. You can find it on our website or use the BBC News app. Right, I'm back with the latest from the newsroom in half an hour. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Hello, you're watching Breakfast with John Kay and Naga Manchetti.
Good morning. Just after 8:30, very busy Friday morning here because 48 million people across Britain had the chance to have their say in a bumper day of elections yesterday, and we're starting to get the first results, and they've been pretty significant.
Yeah, we absolutely are. Of course, we had the result of Hartlepool, a key seat in terms of a long-term Labour stronghold for 50 years, has swung to the Conservatives significantly with a vote difference of nearly 7,000. A Conservative MP, a female Conservative MP, the first female MP elected in Hartlepool. We got that result about 2 hours ago. No, about an hour and a half ago, didn't we?
Yes, and it's just the beginning. Lewis Goodall from Newsnight has been loading all the data into his super screen, which is now working, and he can tell us what to look out for. I said that confidently, Lewis. I believe in you.
Oh, I'm just as confident as you. Please don't fail me now. Yes, John, absolutely. You know, really, really mammoth result. I mean, there's going to be so many more results to come throughout the day, but it is worth focusing on this one. This has been a Labour stronghold, as you say, in one form or another since 1964. We've got all the results going back to 2005 there. Labour, 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 Labour. Go all the way back to when Harold Wilson was Prime Minister. This seat has been Labour. Now a majority of 7,000. So not just a narrow victory, not even just a decent victory, a really, really solid, stonking victory, in fact, basically doubling the Conservative vote. And how did they do it? Well, that is the really interesting thing and the thing that's most chilling of all for Labour. 52% of the vote outright there. Look at this. This is how they do it. The Tories, up 23%. Labour down 9%. But then the Reform Party, you might think, who the hell are the Reform Party? They were called the Brexit Party until 2019. Before that, you might argue, to some extent, they were a sort of successor to UKIP. And look at that. They're down 25%. Conservatives up 23 points. They have basically flipped. The Conservatives have absorbed that. And the worrying thing for Labour, you might say, well, this is just one seat. This was a very heavily voting Leave seat. You can see down there, 70%. The worrying thing for the Labour Party is there is a whole clutch of other seats, like Hartlepool, like Doncaster, like Pontefract, Easington, lots of seats in the North and Midlands that also had big Brexit Party votes. If the Conservatives can take those seats in a general election, perform the same trick again, then you could be looking at an enhanced Conservative majority into 3 figures, perhaps. And then just have a look at this just quickly, because it isn't just about Hartlepool, of course, it's about the council election results as well. And you shouldn't be seeing this board. This is an unusual board for an election. You've got 50 Conservative gains in an 11th year of a Conservative government. Labour down 54. You would expect, just looking at that, if you were saying, well, which party's in government after 11 years, you'd think, well, it must be Labour, mustn't it, because they're going down. Quite the opposite. This is just very, very unusual. And we can see if we look at the councils there as well. The Conservatives gain 3 councils. Labour down 1 council. And this is what is perhaps most interesting about the whole thing. If we look at it here again, just very, very quickly, an example of this, Nuneaton and Bedworth in the Midlands, classic marginal sort of territory. How has it happened? 10 Labour defences, down 10, gain to the Conservatives, and they've done that basically by absorbing, again, the old UKIP vote. So this is the big worry for the Labour Party going forward. It's a realignment that's taking place throughout the country, the sort of what you might loosely call the right of centre vote coming together, coalescing as one, whilst what you might broadly say the progressive left of centre vote, the Labour, the Greens, Lib Dems, still separate. And in that situation, the Conservatives triumphing in a way that you would not normally expect for a government in its 11th year of power.
Lewis, thanks very much. Lewis taking us through the numbers, which he's going to be doing over the whole of the weekend.
So many numbers.
Indeed, absolutely.
He loves his numbers.
We were talking to Chris Mason earlier, of course, our political correspondent, and talking about the impact this is going to have on the leader of the Labour Party, Sir Keir Starmer. Perhaps one of the first real tests, and just looking at the repercussions of this, because it's maybe not so much changing the picture of the seats, but it's changing the tone.
Yeah, the tone across the country, but in Westminster too. Let's speak to our political editor, Laura Kuenssberg, who joins us live on Breakfast now. Laura, Chris Mason in Hartlepool was saying this is like an earthquake, but the tremors are going to be felt down in the House of Commons, aren't they?
Yeah, no question about that, John. Good morning, everybody. I mean, it's a real thumping in Hartlepool. You know, the Tories didn't just take it from the Labour Party. They didn't just nose it by a whisker. They absolutely romped home just about double the vote. You know, looking at the pictures, I was looking earlier, and you saw all the piles of ballot papers on the tables piling up for the Tory candidate, and it looked like the tables might actually collapse under the weight of all the ballots. And as you say, any by-election always gets people in Westminster excited, but this is really, really interesting because it plays right into that question, the really central one that has preoccupied everybody in Westminster since the general election, is what the Tories did in 2019, where they gobbled up lots of former Labour seats and turned them blue, just a flash in the pan, or is it a trend that they can dig in and dig in and dig in? And this result suggests very much that they are strengthening their grip on parts of the country where the Labour Party used to take voters pretty much for granted. And now the Tories are very much able to actually not just grab those seats, but dig in, get some foundations down and try to make their areas permanent. And that's really the question, which does put pressure on Keir Starmer. There's no question about that. And you can point to the historical trends that definitely are at play here, but there's definitely pressure on him just over a year in the job.
And what sort of pressure have we already seen and heard on Keir Starmer as that Hartlepool result sinks in?
Yeah, so we've already got a flavour of the strife you'll get from the left. So the organising group, Momentum, that campaign group that was behind Jeremy Corbyn, are already out there saying there's got to be a change of direction. People, our viewers, will be familiar with hearing from, back in the days of Jeremy Corbyn's leadership, John McDonnell, the former Shadow Chancellor, has been out this morning saying that the candidates were sent in naked with no argument. They should have been making the popular arguments that they made back in Jeremy Corbyn's time. Diane Abbott, another former frontbencher under Jeremy Corbyn, has been saying that Starmer has to change direction. One former member of the NEC, the party's ruling body from the left, has even told me this morning that Keir Starmer should actually quit. Now, when you talk to Keir Starmer's allies, I think they know that they're going to have a bumpy time. They don't, at this point, anticipate really anything that would be meaningful in terms of trying to push him out or anything that's a very, very serious challenge. And if anything, John, I think they're going to come punching out the other way. I think they're going to much more aggressively make the case for change, maybe have a reshuffle around of the pack of their top team in the next few days. But the question, even for his allies, is what is Keir Starmer's genuine solution to all of this? He's a very different character to Jeremy Corbyn. He's credible, he's competent. People say that he's started to turn things around in the mess that was the Labour Party after the general election. But what does he really stand for? What's his magic ingredient that he can actually get across to voters? I'm not sure they've got a simple and convincing answer to that yet.
And I suppose it becomes more complicated, doesn't it, over the next couple of days, because the spotlight shining brightly on Hartlepool this morning, but there's going to be multiple spotlights over the next couple of days as we look all over Britain for results of different kinds.
Absolutely right. And without wanting to sort of give people a whole blizzard of information, there are so many different elections this time, really, really crucial votes in Scotland in particular that could open up a whole big tangle over the constitution. That could become Boris Johnson's biggest headache very quickly if Nicola Sturgeon hits the magic number of 65 seats and then starts demanding another vote on independence. Equally very important contest in Wales, where during the pandemic, people really had a good look at what the meaning of devolution was. You know, those powers that are held by Cardiff. The First Minister there, Mark Drakeford, really front and centre in a way that people perhaps hadn't seen before. And all sorts of different contests in England. So it's right to say at this point, there's a lot still to come. And the picture might look quite different in the next few days. But I think that broad argument, that tussle that's focused on between Labour and the Tories in England, I think the dynamic and the story of that is already becoming clear. But important to say too, while the Conservatives are cock-a-hoop at being able to grab places in the north and in the Midlands, some of those towns that we were hearing from Lewis just a few minutes ago, there might be a longer-term question for them too. What about their more traditional voters in the south of England, the more well-heeled cliché of the sort of gin and jag Tory voter set? In a few years, might they feel a bit left behind?
Busy weekend, Laura. Have you got your energy bars, lots of coffee?
Always. Tea overnight and then coffee from about now, so I need to get on it, John.
Get some bananas. Thank you, Laura. Good luck
Cheers.
this weekend.
Great to see you.
Oh, so Laura was saying, look, we've got many more results set to be declared across England, Wales and Scotland throughout the weekend with loads of numbers to crunch. And someone who loves crunching those numbers is Sir John Curtis, Professor of Politics at the University of Strathclyde. John, good to see you. You're in your element, aren't you?
Yes, indeed. Though, of course, on this occasion, we've had the privilege of being able to have a few hours sleep before we start this whole exercise. I must admit, my heart goes out to those correspondents who've been standing in Hartlepool all night, thinking they were going to get a declaration, and those of us who just got up early in the morning have been able to follow it all anyway.
It's always the way. I think they're all used to it by now. OK, so what's catching your eye at the moment? Obviously, we've been focusing a lot. We've taken a look at Hartlepool, Nuneaton and Harlow. We're looking at some of those swing constituencies, those swing results. And we've also been talking about the overall tone this is going to have in Westminster when it comes to the politics. Yep. What's catching your eye?
Well, the truth is that Hartlepool is part of a wider story that's already in evidence in nearly 200 or so wards where we've actually got the detailed voting results of the local elections and, as you say, begun to crunch the numbers. 2 points to make. The first is that certainly as compared with what happened back in 2016, there's a very clear swing from Labour to the Conservatives since then. Not surprising, because then Labour and the Conservatives were roughly neck and neck. Labour are behind the Conservatives in the polls at the moment. So we're getting confirmation of the story of the polls that the Conservatives are ahead. Less of a swing since 2017, but then the Tories did much better in 2017. But the second thing we're picking up is that, as in Hartlepool, very strong Leave voting England switching towards the Conservatives. We're also seeing now in the local elections that in Leave voting areas, above all, these are the places where the swing to the Conservatives is strongest, not least because, as in Hartlepool, it is the ex-UKIP stroke Brexit party vote that is going to the Conservatives. Now, there is a counter side to this. If we actually look at some of the places which voted quite strongly for Remain, then actually there's a swing to Labour in some of those, particularly in those places that last voted in 2017. So we're still going to get something of a mixed picture, but we are getting confirmation of what Lewis has been talking about. I don't think we're really talking about further realignment of British politics. What we're seeing is the realignment that was already evident in 2019 now being played out through again in these elections, because we're talking, in the case of the local elections, of results that were last contested in some instances before the EU referendum even took place. So what we're seeing, and it's certainly therefore Labour Party's hope. I mean, this is the central, the crucial battle. The Labour Party in the last 12 months, its strategy on Brexit has seemed to be to say as little as possible, to harry the government on other issues, but not to talk about Brexit, in the hope that this would mean that the party would begin to make itself available and supportable by Leave voters. Well, the opinion polls have been saying throughout the last 12 months, this is not working. No evidence at all. The Labour Party particularly gaining ground amongst the Leave voters that they lost in 2017 and 2019. And now we're getting confirmation of that already in the ballot boxes, not just in Hartlepool, but also in other parts of England. And this will raise a question for Labour about what is going to be a strategy. This is not simply an argument between left and right inside the Labour Party. It's also an argument about what is the purpose of this party and how does it achieve it? It's a party that likes to think of itself as the party of working class voters. Well, actually, more working class voters voted Conservative than Labour in 2019. And we are again seeing in the local election results, as Leave voting areas go towards the Conservatives, that also means that working class areas are going towards the Conservatives.
Yeah.
So Labour either have to work out a strategy for reclaiming the working class despite Brexit, or does it have to accept that actually these days the Labour Party is the party of young people, of university graduates, of social liberals, the kind of people who live in London where Labour is probably going to do well? And that's a big existential question facing the Labour Party.
So many questions, and we get the pleasure of your company tomorrow to analyse some more results and look at some of these questions that are going to be asked. So for the moment, I will say thanks very much. That's Professor Sir John Curtis, Professor of Politics at the University of Strathclyde.
And if you want to get into the numbers yourself, I've just been looking actually on the BBC's politics page. We've got people putting all the figures in, and you can look at the results in your area and what's happening and getting the analysis. And they're being updated all the time. Every second there are counts going on in councils and police and crime commissioners and, of course, the nations too.
OK, 8:45 is the time. We're going to take you outside. Indeed. The time now is 8:59. You're watching Breakfast.